On the day when I met Bob Hoffman, I had been invited to a talk of his in Leo Zepp's house, and before driving my car to that place, I was thinking of number 17. For reasons I can't explain today, very taken with this prime number 17. And when Bob Hoffman gave his talk, when he introduced himself and told his story, he several times mentioned number 17. And that was to me significant. Is he reading my mind? I suspected he might want to make me feel that he could do that. So that was very important to me. If I would tell certain kinds of people, that would seem very unbelievable. He told how he became psychic in search for his mother after his mother died. He was very attached to his mother. He was very much wanting some contact. And he had come to a certain church after many attempts. And in this Oakland church, where everybody was a psychic. And they gave psychic classes, and that's how he awoke to his potential as a medium. And he explained about asking about his mother and being told things that only his mother and he knew, as a kind of demonstration that this was a real contact and not somebody's fantasy. And I felt that not only was he telling that he could read people's minds, that it was reading the minds of living people and reading the minds of the dead was not so different. Bob was saying he had now a method, a way of working. He told about Dr. Fisher, whom he had known. I doubted. For some time I thought Dr. Fisher was an indirect reference to Christ, fisherman, that it was a metaphor. But I looked in the University of California library and I found a book by Siegfried Fischer.
Got transmitted as an idea that he received the basic structure from Fisher.
Yes.
Seems reliable.
Oh yes, no question about that.
You did with him his sessions, no, on one-to-one.
Yes, I did the 8 sessions, 2 hours each. That was the process.
And
8 individual hours. It was very structured. On the first session, he had me visualize my sanctuary. He said, I see you on a high mountain, very high, distant from the world, something like a hermit. But he interpreted that as a sign that my development was incomplete, and introduced me to my guides. And I was very impressed when he said that one was an old man and the other was a child, Totila and Matthias, my child, my son. Those were my inner lights. So I felt well perceived.
How did he take you through mother and father issues?
Says, now I'm going to tell you about your mother. She's not happy, your mother, as a child. What's wrong with her father? There's something. Your mother feels not loved by her father. And then she was telling me that there was a kind of family shame about my grandfather, my mother's father. He had syphilis, 3rd degree syphilis, brought him to a mental hospital. He was interned as crazy for syphilis complication, as in the old days, the brain complications. She had not felt loved by him. That fit what my mother later told me. Yes, my father used to say I was ugly.
So that is interesting, because it means that already in this very early time he had this idea of going back
a
generation behind the parents.
Oh yes, yes. When I finished those sessions, I felt there was something like in the Kabbalah, in the Jewish tradition, there's something about the balance of severity and compassion, that one should have a balance between being strong, being severe, and being forgiving. And I drew for him a little piece of the tree of life in the Kabbalah on a napkin over lunch. He kept it on his desk for years. One day after we finished the process, Bob said, now that you've done the process, I would like to become your friend. And to become your friend, I have to tell you more about myself. So he told me he was gay. He wanted me to know that. And at the end of that session, where our friendship formally started, he said, if you want to contact people who have died, I'd like to do that for you. So I asked for an interview with Freud. Freud said that the libido theory, it's not a matter of instincts, but more a matter of love. The love frustration, more than sexual frustration, was the heart of things. And there was more with this 1 hour long conversation with Freud. Sorry, I didn't think of recording it, but it left me with a sense of not knowing whether it was Freud or it was Bob who was putting his own perspective in Freud's mouth. So I said, next time I'm going to invoke somebody Bob doesn't know and has nothing to say about. So I said I wanted to get some message from Padmasambhava, the great master of the Mantrayana. Padma? He's not from here, no? No, he's not from here. Why do I see him sitting on a lotus? But he's sitting above, floating above a lotus. And what's special about that? No, it's the only person I've seen like that. Does it have a meaning? Yes. It means he has transcended death. Would he have something to say to me? And he gave me a mantra. And the heart of the mantra was the word ish, that in the Jewish tradition is one of the words used in the Old Testament for man, but it's a sense of the word man that has to do with being a witness, one who happens to be there and causes an important part of history to happen, something like a catalyst.
Was that like, were you saying to Bob at some day, let's do out of this basic structure a 3 months program?
No, I felt I felt free to create a program, and he not only approved, but I was seeing him weekly on that time, and he said, I see Fisher with you. Fisher is walking around you, and he's helping you, he's inspiring you. And actually, I felt it was a high inspiration. I felt it came to me with a clarity, with a precision. I generated it probably in one sitting or in a couple of days. Very, very fast I had the scheme of it. It was translating the pattern of his work into a group process. And he was happy about that. The first adaptation I did was 3 months.
3 months.
It was a quarter, one a SAT quarter. It became a part of SAT, not what I learned from Bob, but a group process, a mutually assisted group process that Bob attended. And he did the closure session. And he attended and imitated it. He did a group process, and he emphasized he did it differently. First time he did the group process, he did it in Berkeley, in City Club. He insisted this was not encounter group, this was not like anything before. He emphasized the contrast. He wanted his process to be exactly like he did it. He wanted people to imitate even his words. It was like memorizing a play for an actor. He wanted his people to be repeaters of his trips, his visualizations. Like one who makes a libretto for an opera, he wanted a program in the literal sense of the word. And once I was asked to write in some German magazine, a Gestalt magazine probably, and I wrote, it may be said that this is not like Gestalt therapy, something based on creative improvisation, but it's like canned food. But it's a very good can. And then there was a man called Bob Ornstein. He was Idris Shah's representative. And Idris Shah had suggested that Stanford University sponsor something in conjunction with Esalen, and that they invite me to do something. I did this presentation of a 4-day process, very compact. I did a 4 days once there, and then I repeated it in Mexico and other places, and it worked. It was very potent, but of course 10 days is better. We did collaborate specific things, like I remember when I was invited by him to do a bitch session, I would do my automatic movements, I would become a tiger and get the tigerish out and roar and translate that into a background for adding the words and the specific traits that were addressed and so forth. So he took from many people, but I had the impression that there was a kind of absorption of the Gestalt resources. At the beginning, bitching was just speaking aloud, speaking aggressively, but not shouting. And there came a time when he expected bitching to produce vomiting. He wanted people to go in and further and further into the emotion to get a visceral reaction.
Was forgiveness, compassion at that time?
Oh yes, yeah, that was intrinsic to the process. The idea of compassion was from the very beginning, the essence of the understanding in order to be able to forgive. and compassion to be able to forgive.
The idea of going to a layer of vindictiveness, is that also something that is there from the beginning, or?
No, but it was Bob's too. Getting angry with God.
Yes.
I was familiar with that notion through the influence of Zalman Schachter, who's a rabbi who taught in the early Sat too. And he says prayer is no good if you can't get angry with God. You have to get exasperated with God. I think it's an older practice. I think it's Reb Nachman of Bratslav. He's the most inspired mystic of the Hasidic tradition. And he had people shout at God, go into the wilderness, and not only pray weeping, but shouting angrily. In the role of a friend, he was very generous and took me out for lunch or dinner many times in the company of Rosalia, always paid. We loved Bob in spite of everything.
The last moment on his deathbed, you remember that moment?
He was tranquil and he was very enthusiastic about the future of his work. He had the sense of having contributed something that the world would be thankful for. Okay?
Thank you very much. I think we have a lot.
We have a lot.
We have a lot.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mettre un peu comme ça, t'as fait une par là-bas. Distance, te quito. Uy, te quito el micrófono.